Hello to those joining us online and to those watching the video. Afterwards, we are very pleased to welcome you to this event by the Science-Based Targets Initiative at COP27. And we're going to be discussing today a very exciting topic, which is how science-based target setting has been growing in the Global South. And we have an excellent group of speakers today and panelists that are going to be sharing with us their experience in driving the adoption of science-based targets and also implementing science-based targets, and also what we can do to accelerate the adoption of science-based targets in the Global South. My name is Alberto Carrillo. I'm Chief Technical Officer for the Science-Based Targets Initiative, and I'm very happy to be with you today. So the agenda that we have today, I'm going to start with a brief introduction about science-based targets and also with an overview about how the adoption of science-based targets has been growing over the past few years in different geographies. And then we are going to have a panel discussion, and we're going to introduce our distinguished panelists when we go to the panel. And then we're going to have some discussion afterwards. So to start with, Science-Based Targets Initiative is a global initiative that is driving and certifying the integrity of climate targets by businesses and financial institutions. It's an initiative that was founded by CDP, UN Global Compact, WRI, and WWF, and we've been working in collaboration with the Women Business Coalition since the beginning to drive the adoption of science-based targets in the corporate sector. And there's basically 4 key areas around which we focus our work. The first one is to set standards and to develop guidance to inform the adoption of targets that are consistent with our global climate goals and that are informed by the best available science. Then we work with a number of partners to drive the adoption of science-based targets in the real economy and in the financial sector. Then we conduct and we verify independently the integrity and ambition of targets set by companies and financial institutions. And we work with a number of partners and through a number of mechanisms to embed the adoption of science-based targets in different parts of the economy. Now, the journey that companies follow when they join SBTi, they normally start by setting a public commitment to set a science-based target. After that, they start the process internally to model their targets, to collect the data that they need, to understand the implications, to go through the internal process that they need to go through to set targets. And then when they are ready, they submit their targets for validation by the SBTi. And then after that, they announce the target publicly. And this happens within a period of 24 months. And after that, companies move into the target implementation phase. And the target implementation phase, as part of the accountability mechanisms that we have in place, companies report progress against their targets, and then we assess also the progress by companies. You go to the next slide. Today we have around 4,000 companies that are in the process of setting science-based targets or implementing science-based targets. And out of these, we have already around 2,000 companies that have gone through the process of setting targets and that are now in the implementation phase. And last year, we launched a net zero standard that basically brings ambition and credibility to net zero targets. And we have now almost 1,500 companies that have committed to set net zero targets in line with this standard. And one of the signs that give us a lot of encouragement is also the progress that we are seeing in terms of how companies are reducing emissions after they set their targets. In our progress report that was launched earlier this year, we see already that science-based targets are covering 1/3 of global market capitalization. 96% of the targets set by companies include scope 3. Now we have the majority of targets that are 1.5 degree aligned, and companies that are setting targets are actually disclosing emission reductions that are in line or above the level of reduction that is consistent with limiting warming to 1.5 degrees. So it's really encouraging to see the progress, the coverage, and also the fact that targets being set by companies are actually leading to emission reductions. Now, this is a very interesting chart, and this shows how the adoption of science-based targets has grown in different geographies. At the beginning, we had the majority of companies that were setting science-based targets headquartered in North America, in Europe, and in Japan. But in the past 2-3 years, what we've seen is that the number of companies setting science-based targets in other geographies has been growing rapidly. And this is very exciting because this is exactly the type of transformation that we need to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, and also the incentive that we need to bring all the economies in the world to be prepared to the future net zero economy that we are building. And we're going to hear more from different perspectives in the 3 regions, Africa, Latin America, and Southeast Asia in our panel. Now I'm going to hand over to Paulina, who is our communications manager, who is going to be moderating the panel and introducing our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Alberto, and thank you all for joining us today virtually and on place. Thank you to our panelists here at COP and also virtually. Right now we're going to hear from Sanjeev Rajuvir, Group Sustainability Manager from ShopRite Holdings, who is joining us virtually and will share with us what setting and delivering science-based targets has meant for this company. So welcome, Sanjeev, and please let us know if you listen to us and start your presentation.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I can hear you, and we'll go straight into the presentation. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we are looking at your presentation right now.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to talk about the ShopRite Group's target setting and the delivery of our science-based targets. To start with, let me give you a quick overview about the ShopRite Group. The ShopRite Group is headquartered in South Africa, in the southern tip of South Africa in Cape Town. It operates more than 16 commercial brands from Checkers, ShopRite, Checkers Hyper, including more than 16 different types of industries, from food, other types of fast-moving consumer goods, telecommunications, alcohol, furniture, pharmaceuticals, and financial services. It operates in 11 countries across Africa, more than 2,400 corporate stores, and over 500 franchise stores, and employs more than 150,000 employees across the different geographies. Very recently, the ShopRite Group re-articulated its purpose to be one really about uplifting the lives of people every day by providing access to the most affordable goods and services while creating economic opportunities and protecting the planet. And this was quite an important period for us because for the group, we've included protecting the planet as a key and integral part that's at the core of the organization. To realize this, we've developed a sustainability strategy that includes focus areas of climate and energy, water and wastewater, sustainable packaging, waste, including food waste and biodiversity and responsible sourcing. Today, I'm going to talk to you more about our position and our focus on climate change. The group recognizes and acknowledges that climate change will impact not only its direct operations, but also its supply chain and its customers. As we saw recently in the heavy floods that went through the eastern part of South Africa, including Mozambique, that destroyed tomato and potato crops, impacting on availability and price. Also, recently this year, we saw the impacts of heavy flooding in the southern part of South Africa, the eastern part of South Africa, I beg your pardon, namely KwaZulu-Natal, where primarily low-income households were impacted. So for this reason, we've developed a climate change strategy that includes, on the one hand, the mitigation, how the group will mitigate against climate change, and on the other hand, the adaptation. When we looked at mitigation, we decided to set ourselves a target, and we looked around to see what is the most challenging, but also a target that makes sense. And for that reason, we embraced the sustainability, the Science-Based Targets Initiative in terms of their methodology and in terms of their process. I'm happy to announce that a few weeks ago, we had our science-based targets approved by the SBTi, Science-Based Targets Initiative. And our targets are in line with the trajectory of limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees. In fact, our target specifically is around reducing our Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions by 42% by 2030, using 2020 as a base. And we've included a Scope 3 target, which is to reduce our Scope 3 emissions by 25% by the same time period as well, focusing primarily and specifically on our customers and the use of sold products. The group then, in terms of our mitigation strategy, started a few years ago in terms of improving its energy efficiency. And we've, over the years, replaced our lighting to be more energy efficient, so embracing LED lighting. In the next couple of months, we would have changed more than 1 million of our light bulbs to energy efficient LED light bulbs. So saving the group in excess of 400 million kilowatt hours over the last few years. We've also looked at our logistics and our transportation networks by reducing the amount of diesel that we consume. Very recently, the ShopRite Group purchased the highest energy efficient vehicles, diesel efficient vehicles, the Euro 5 diesel engines. And the group also optimizes its routing so it can limit the amount and reduce the amount of kilometers that it travels, also reducing the amount of dead kilometers that are traveled as well. And we've installed solar panels on the roofs of the trailers. In that way, our solar panels are able to operate the refrigeration unit without consuming diesel on the vehicles. At the same time, our key initiative is the decarbonization of our direct operations. For that reason, we've embraced the use of renewable energy in our stores and our distribution centers. In the last year, we installed more than 30 stores and distribution centers with solar PV panels on the roof, bringing the total number of sites that we have to 64, with a total installed capacity of 27 megawatts. The stages that we have to embrace after this now are around engaging with our landlords, where our landlords have installed the solar PV on their rooftops. And then an important aspect for us is the wheeling of renewable energy from multiple generators into the national grid and into our multiple stores across the country and across the continent. That remains the biggest opportunity for us to decarbonize our operations. With all of that, what now? I think we have to collectively accelerate decarbonization. And to do that, we need to work collectively with government, business, and civil society. Further to that, it's important to set bold ambitions, as we have with the science-based targets. But those bold ambitions have to be backed up by decisive and meaningful actions, as we've demonstrated here for the ShopRite Group. Because without these actions, these ambitions and targets will remain just ambitions and targets. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Sanjeev, and please stay connected so that we can keep the conversation going. Right now, we are going to give the floor to Taisi Bedushi, Sustainable Manager for Grupo Malwee. Welcome, and thanks for sharing with us your experience through this target setting process.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to say thanks to SBTi for the invitation and greet my colleagues here. And as a second point, I would like to introduce our company. Grupo Malwee is a 54-year-old company with 6 brands in its portfolio. And it has 4.2 thousand employees that produced 49 million of garments piece last year to attend 25,000 clients and customers in Brazil and 250 stores distributed in 80% of Brazilian cities. Grupo Malwee has 3 factories and 2 offices in Brazil. Our market is 100% Brazilian, and our production is made, it's 98% produced in Brazil. To provide this production, Grupo Malwee has more 2.5 thousand suppliers. Talking about the motivation that moved Grupo Malwee to sign the SBTi commitment, I need to recover the textile impact sectors and the Grupo Malwee history. They produce more than 100 billion pieces of garment yearly. Some numbers told 150 billions. And it is intensive in the chemical use, waste production, waste generation, and pollutes water, and produce a high level of greenhouse gas emission. And we has a history from human rights violation too that is not so connected with SBTi, but it's the huge problems or issues that we have in our chain. As part of this sector, Malwee groups have been working to reduce these issues since its foundation, and it was founded in 2068. 10 years later, it creates its first park. It's Parque Malwee. It's an area with 1.5 million square meters, where we planted 3,000 trees. And after that, sorry, I became a little bit nervous to talk. And after we acquired other forests and making more 4.3 million square meters. And this resulted in our first neutralization of carbon emission in 2007 and 2008. During this history, Grupo Malwee have been working to reduce other impacts, not only in emissions, but in water mainly, because we are really huge consumers of water. And we invest in high technology to do this, like jeans that you produce with only 1 glass of water in the laundry. We reduce 98%. It's a technology that has only 5 in global. It's first in Latin America. And we develop our process to reduce water to produce the neon color. We reduce 96% of this process too. And we have been working in the waste reduction. We had a plan in 2015. We launched our first plan. We were the first company to launch a sustainable plan with 15 goals. One of them was to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in scope 1 and 2. Our goal were to reduce 20%, and we achieved 75%. After that, we decided to be the first company in Brazil, a textile company in Brazil, and correcting me, to sign the science-based target commitment and the business ambition 1.5. And for us, it was proud, but we decided to be the first one be a leader in this movement. So in that first plan that we launched, we had another goal that were to apply LCA, life cycle assessment, in our plants, and this helped us to understand the scope 3 too. We provide our footprint from water and greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption, so it supports us when we decided to commit to SBTi. So all this history and the respect for nature resource that we have in our history, it comes from generation to generation, because as I told you, our park is from 1978, our first investment in nature, and this voluntary, it always was a voluntary basis, and with this clarity and of our lives and the business are directly impacted by climate change. So we decided to join Business Ambition after all, because it couldn't be different in our history, because we need to be the first one and to bring other companies with that. So I believe that it is in our essence, in our DNA. Our CEO used to say that we want to be a leader, and we want to be a leader by example, bring the other with us. So talking about the challenge, Grupo Malwee has its entire chain emit 184,000 of tons of greenhouse gas and in the atmosphere, and 5% is direct emissions, it's scope 1, less than 1% is scope 2, because it's electrical source, and around 94% is from scope 3 in our value chain. So as I told you before, we achieved 70% of reductions until 2020. Our basis from SBTi was 2019, and since 2009 we reduced more 19%. But in scope 1 and 2 it's not a problem for us, because we have technology in Brazil to do this. We change our energy metrics. But when we talk about scope 3, we have a real challenge. Our goal is to reduce 58% less greenhouse gas from purchased material and service per style produced. It's an intensity goals, because it's a really challenge to deal with scope 3. And such the products and service brought represents 83% of this 94 of the scope 3. And which 47% is from yarn and 15% fabrics. It means like 76% of our productions came from cotton. And we have a challenge here to have trust and primary data from different kinds of cotton. Like EcoInvent, that is the database that we use to calculate the emissions. We use a global number, so we have many difference between production and global and in Brazil. When we talk about Brazilian cotton, it's different. When we talk about better cotton initiative, Brazilian cotton, we have other kind of impacts and other kind reductions of impacts, because better cotton initiatives establish goals to better cotton initiatives. Thank you. Better cotton initiatives has goals to reduce chemical use in plantations and water, so it impacts in mainly chemical and the emissions. And we have recycled cotton, now recycled cotton from cutting process or before use of garments and post-use garments, because this year Malwee launched its first circular economy products produced with used garments that we collect after from our clients. So all these numbers, we need to have primary data and understand how this is impact our reduction, because we're talking about the 0.5% of our goal. So, and now talking about opportunity, we believe that we need to be easier access to financing and like green bonds and linking bonds to support us. Malwee used in the past different kind of investments to improve the environmental process. So we have plans to implement a new project to increase the water consumption, but usually when I have a project, I have a trade-off to deal. And in this case, the process of the laundry and now the new process to increase the use of water will increase the energy consumption. But we are in the project solar energy planned to improve to install in our factory too, so to don't have a trade-off. But with the discussions at this COP, we believe we will have more access to technology and financial to improve our company. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Thais. Thank you for this very interesting experience. And we will move to listen from Subrata Chakravarti, Senior Manager Climate from WRI India. We have him on the presentation, please, and to listen from the Southeast Asia experience.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The science is clear about how to prevent increasingly dangerous and irreversible climate change impacts. We need to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees C, which means we need to cut down greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030 and reach net zero by mid-century. This would require governments and the non-state actors, including businesses, to take climate actions that is aligned with the science. According to a recent report by STBi, the financial impact of climate-related risks on businesses in India is estimated to be around 3,285 billion Indian rupees. On the brighter side, there is a surge in non-state actors' climate actions, with growing commitments and announcements on the climate actions that can have direct impact on national emission trajectories, help in designing future policies, and achieve the climate targets. We wanted to understand the emission reduction potential of the companies who have set science-based targets and highlight as to how it contributes in meeting the current NDC targets in India and inform enhancing of the ambitious climate targets. By March of 2021, 23 Indian companies across diverse sectors have set science-based targets to reduce their emissions of greenhouse gases. Our research quantifies the emission reduction potential of the commitments by 22 Indian businesses that have set science-based targets and their expected impact on India's greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. We drew some interesting findings. Implementing the science-based targets of 22 study companies in full could lower India's greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 by between 0.51% and 0.62%. Not only that, greenhouse gas emissions from the industrial sector could be reduced between 1.89% and 2.4% in 2030. The effect will be amplified when more companies. We also found that adopting and implementing science-based targets help accelerate decarbonization in these companies. Emissions in these 22 companies were expected to grow at an average compounded annual rate of 3.89% under the business as usual scenario from 2021 to 2030, with India's gross domestic product projected to reach $6.5 trillion by 2030. With strong climate policy reforms, the GDP is projected to reach $9 trillion by 2030, with a growth rate of 9% per annum. The emission growth of these 22 companies would, however, slow down to approximately 3% per year if their science-based targets are fully achieved. So achievement of science-based target by these companies would lead to a cumulative emission reduction of nearly 165 million tons of CO2 in scope 1 and almost 16 million tons of CO2 in scope 2 emissions between 2021 and 2030. To conclude, I would like to make 3 points. First, the businesses have opportunities to scale up the climate actions that are aligned with science. According to our research, initial commitments shows that the progress is possible in hard-to-abate sectors. Our research also shows that utilities and independent power producers can play a crucial role in India's decarbonization journey and help India achieve its climate goals. Second, uptake of science-based targets in India's micro, medium, and small-scale industry is still very low, where India's MSME sector contributes nearly 29% of India's GDP and consists of 63 million units. As of March 2021, only 2 MSMEs in India have adopted science-based target. Therefore, capacity building and technical hand-holding will be crucial to mitigate the climate vulnerability among MSMEs. Third, climate actions by Indian businesses can incentivize, support, and inspire additional climate action by exchanging knowledge and good practices. Companies with approved science-based targets can engage in advocacy and policy dialogue by assisting in formulating action plans and by building capacities across their value chains. Assessment of voluntary science-based targets from Indian businesses can inform the next round of NDC discussions and send policy signals on the possibilities of adoption of low-carbon pathways in a carbon-constrained future. With this, I conclude my remarks. I take this opportunity to thank Alberto and Science Based Target Initiative to give me this opportunity to present our research. I wish that you all will have a productive discussion and devise concrete steps to drive climate actions that is aligned with science. Thank you so much.
We appreciate very much the time that Dr. Subrata took to record this video. He was actually traveling back to Delhi from COP, so thank you very much. And we'll pass the baton to Jala. Jala Sadek, Program and Participants Relations Manager at UNGC Egypt. Thank you, Jala.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Egypt. We're so happy to have you here, and I hope you enjoyed your stay with us. So let me tell you very briefly what the Climate Ambition Accelerator is. So the Climate Ambition Accelerator is basically a joint effort between SBTi and the Compact to showcase what we do in terms of the climate agenda. It's a 6-month program that is designed to support organizations to start their journey. And this is so a little bit of a backstory. Today, this is the first year that the UN Global Compact Egypt runs the Climate Ambition Accelerator. And the Climate Ambition Accelerator, I think this is better. So the first time we were running it, the market in Egypt is still progressing and growing, but the appetite is there. And while some of the companies that were taking part may have not had enough expertise in the climate field, we encourage them to just join the program, because at any given moment, it's good to start. Just start. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter where you are from the climate journey. Even if you are just starting by doing simple things, getting the knowledge, having all of it's a 6-month intensive course, And I've experienced it firsthand, and trust me, while some companies may not be able to apply some of the things they have learned, they are bound to apply some other things. It will help them start working on what they need to work on in order to contribute to the climate agenda that is happening locally, regionally, and globally. This year we ran it with Africa, and it was an opportunity for us to run it with Africa specifically, because this year Egypt is hosting COP on behalf of the Africa region. And while Egypt is situated kind of in the middle between the Middle East and Africa, however, when it comes to access to resources, access to finance, we face similar challenges when it comes to those. But given that Africa is getting the spotlight that it needed so much, you can see a lot of opportunities are opening up, and the appetite for climate change is increasing. We already have 5 companies in Egypt that are already committing to join the Climate Ambition Accelerator in 2023, just so that they can start setting science-based targets, just so that they can start understanding what they could do, even though we have companies from various sectors, from the real estate and construction. We have from an e-commerce platform. We have a financial holding platform. We have a logistics company. The appetite is there, and the need is growing, and the urgency to act is of the most importance. So what we have been telling the companies is that listen to each other's experience, because we don't have time to reinvent the wheel. We want to build on each other's success. Let's all talk about what we have failed in doing, so that other companies don't have to face the same consequences, don't have to face the same obstacles. We have told the companies is that you don't have to do everything. Doing everything at once may be a recipe for disaster, but doing things that are relevant to your organization, that is relevant to your sector, is going to help you succeed, is going to help you build. And this is honestly, I know I'm a bit biased, but this is why I love the UN Global Compact, is that you get to bring so many people into one space from different sectors, from various sizes, and you just have an interactive discussion. For example, we were hosting the program on Zoom. You can see the chat box, you can see a lot of companies linking to each other. You can see a lot of companies just saying, hey, by the way, I did so and so and so when it came to scope 3, because I think the most difficult scope is scope 3. We did so and so and so, especially in Egypt. It's very difficult because the climate agenda has been put on a fast track only the past couple of years. So seeing companies do that, they were able to advise each other, specifically in Egypt as well, on what to do, who to talk to, what are the standards that are intertwined within our local sustainable development strategy as well as the local climate strategy. And all of this was very important, and this is why, again, I'm reiterating what I said. It's very important for companies to sit and have an open dialogue. And this is what we advocate for, and this is why we ran the program on a regional level. By the way, we have Lucas, the Climate Ambition Accelerator program manager from our Global Compact office. So this is why we ran it on a regional level. And I was just talking to a colleague of mine from a local network that was experiencing similar circumstances to the local network in Egypt, and we were telling him, run the program. It is so important because you need to get the idea out there, and the private sector has the biggest they are the biggest catalyst to change. They have the biggest power to make an impact because as a business, they operate and they serve consumers. So they're not, it's just the impact is going to be rippled very quickly through the private sector. I don't want to be talking for too long, but like just one thing is that starting to understand the problem is very important, because and the dialogues we're having here, we have one of the biggest companies in Egypt, the real estate and construction. They've been having issues with thinking that there isn't access to finance for setting science-based targets, when in fact they were just not sitting at the right tables. They were not making the right conversations, because the CEO was just telling us, I now found out that there's just so much access to finance. I just needed to be talking to the right people. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Yala, for this very interesting sharing. And we'll pass the word to Rebecca Lima, Executive Director from CDP Latin America. Welcome, Rebecca.
Thank you. Thank you all for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here speaking at this panel. As you all know, and it was presented at the beginning, CDP is one of the founding founders of the SBTi initiative. So it's my pleasure to be here, especially talking about the South data and challenges and opportunities in the South. But actually here, I'm not speaking only as CDP Latin America, but as CDP, especially to bring you a little bit of a perspective of how investors, they are collaborating with the agenda. And just to give you a brief background, CDP is one organization that runs one of the biggest investors engagement campaign with companies. It already started with disclosure engagement. As probably you all know, CDP is more famous for engaging companies through investors on disclosing their environmental data. So last year, actually, we thought about, well, why don't we take all this investment power to expand their campaigns and also have a science-based targets engagement campaign? And we did it, and it was a success. Including this year, we had more than 300 signatories investors that were engaging through CDP and inviting companies to set their science-based targets, emissions reduction targets. These investors, they represent more than 37 trillion in assets. And not only investors, we are also able to invite supply chain members, which are companies that use CDP platform to engage with the suppliers, to also invite their own suppliers to set science-based target reductions. This allows us to have a massive increase in terms of engagement and outreach of campaign. And it's not just CDP, WRI, UN Global Compact, and civil society knocking on companies' door and ask them to set a targets. It's their investors, their clients, and this has a massive power. So this year, we are able to get really huge investors such as Crédit Agricole, La Banque Postale, UBS, the European Bank of Investments, and together with the other 300 investors, we are able to engage with more than 1,000 companies, inviting them to set their science-based targets. And these companies, these 1,000 companies, together, they are a source of 7.4 gigaton of CO2 emissions, considering the scope 1 and 2. And for those that don't know, and I still have some challenging trying to translate these numbers, these represent the total emissions of India and US together, combined. So this is the power that engaging through investors and customers and global customers have. And through this campaign, we're able to engage with some of the biggest companies in the world, including BASF, a huge chemical company, Caterpillar, FedEx, General Electric, Walmart Mexico, Wilmar International, and a bunch of other really big names that sometimes you don't even think about it. Like, do they have a science-based target set already? Well, we are doing this job. We are mapping all the strategic companies, big cap companies, and we're engaging with the investors and their customers so we can ask them to help us on engaging with this high priority organizations. And this has a massive impact in the long run. According to the data, companies that are already engaged with the Science-Based Target Initiative, they are able to reduce emission on a pace of 80.8% a year more than an average company. So all companies, or most of the companies engaged with the climate change agenda, they are going through a path of reducing emissions. However, those that are engaged with the science-based targets reduce in a almost like 10% higher rate of reducing, which is huge. And the second thing that I'd like to bring for you today is why we think, why is relevant for investors. So from the investment perspective, what do they get out of this? So first of all, from the investment perspective, engaging the companies on their portfolio on science-based targets. Science-based targets is the first and the main reliable and accurate methodology and assessment to understand if a company is really on the right track, the right pathway towards the 1.5. So from investment perspective, well, we see more nowadays, but it's hard for you to have a climate expert within your own team. So imagine as an investor, you're having to access each net zero commitments of each company within your portfolio, not being an expert. Science-based targets out there doing this job for you already. So it's really easier if you just get science-based targets as a main KPI and take advantage of this group of experts. A lot of them are here with us today that are already assessing and evaluating these targets to see if they are reliable, if they are robust enough. Second, science-based targets from the investor perspective is not only a way to understand and compare targets, but also to see and track progress of the companies within their portfolio. So as it was presented today, SBTi is not just setting targets, but it's also about tracking how you're progressing against it. And you also have this assessment, and you can monitor and understand if your companies in a portfolio are really progressing throughout the year. The third point, and for me personally, it's one of the most important, is for me, it's a very concrete way of mobilizing capital towards climate transition. So we talk a lot about climate finance, especially during the COP, and like it's a lot of it is out there. And usually when you talk about climate finance, you're thinking about international cooperation, philanthropy, or even private sector money, but through loans or blended finance or this innovative mechanism, which is great. They are really needed. However, when you have a company or investors that are using science-based targets as a tool in order to implement the targets, necessarily capital within the organization would be redirected towards implementing the emissions reduction initiatives. So for me, science-based targets is really a climate finance tool as well, if you think about it. And lastly, well, for those of you that know a little bit more about the financial institutions methodology within science-based targets, as investors, asking and inviting the companies within your portfolio in a network to also enjoy the initiative and set their own targets is also a way for you to set your own targets as a financial institutions. So it's also a tool at the end of the day. So you as an organization, because investors at the end of the day are non-party stakeholder organization that are also being pressured at the end of the day to set their own targets, for you to set your own targets and track your own progress. And that's it to summarize.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thanks to all the panel for sharing these very valuable experiences and how setting science-based targets have impacted in the operations, and even after listening to our WRI expert, how science-based targets have impacted in reaching NDCs. So unfortunately, we are out of time, but let me just wrap up with these main points that I could get from all the shared experience that we've heard today from our panelists. So first of all, collaboration. Collaboration is key. It's key at all levels, in all regions and sectors. But we have heard from various of you that sharing the experience, how each of the companies have gotten the positive and the struggles, to share it and to improve into the target setting process is key. We can also say that the resources efficiency has been also a proof of getting investment opportunities, which has been highlighted by some of the panelists, and also how no matter the maturity level that companies have, the important thing is to start taking action. And like science has made it clear, like we are on that tipping point and we have to take action, and we are also experiencing like in our day-to-day basis. So the important thing is to take action, and that's why the Science-Based Targets Initiative is here, to provide companies with the guidance they need to set science-based targets. And we have developed a series of guidances to support that journey from companies. So we invite you to get more information on the Science-Based Targets Initiative in our webpage. Follow us in social media to learn how things can be done, to learn from the experience of other companies in other sectors, in other regions. But the important thing is to act now. There's no tomorrow. Like, we have to act now. So thank you very much all for your time today. Thanks all for attending here virtually, in person, and hope to see you soon again.